Insight Africa, the podcast offering a window to the world of African aviation with your host, John Howell, CEO and founder of Aviadev Africa. Now, ahead of the Aviadev Africa event, which takes place on the 9th to the 11th of June 2021, we're focusing on those organizations that are innovating and adapting to the new operating environment and that are going to play a huge role in supporting the recovery of our wonderful aviation industry, specifically the African aviation industry. Today's no exception, and I'm actually joined today by our good friends at the Embraer team to discuss the ever-evolving topic of aircraft financing and leasing. Some say it's never been a better time to start an airline because, of course, there's an opportunity to disrupt those existing business models with completely new thinking out of the box. And those old business models may no longer be fit for purpose or need some disrupting themselves. And added to that, of course, is the opportunity for new entrant airlines that can take advantage of starting up with no legacy debt. So we're going to explore whether that's a myth or a truth. And we're also going to look at the opportunity to improve intra-African connectivity and the role that the Embraer fleets are going to play in rebuilding the connectivity within Africa. So specifically, my guests to debate this topic today are Matheus Piorino, who is the Director of Customer Finance for Europe, Middle East and Africa, and also Vadims Fokins, who is the Deputy Marketing Director for Leasing at Embraer. So welcome to the podcast, gentlemen.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Fantastic. So I think a great place to start, because neither of you have been on the podcast before, is to actually outline your roles and responsibilities for the benefit of the listeners. So Matheus, can you kick us off with that? What is it that you do?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So my head as Director of Customer Finance at Embraer is mainly to support the customers in assuring that they will have the best financing solutions for their aircraft that they're purchasing from Embraer. So I work with the customers regardless of the phase that we're on the commercial campaign. So whether it's the beginning and the middle, or if it's even after signing the PA, we also support the customer throughout the delivery process. And we monitor the market, we engage with the banks and all financiers to arrange or facilitate the engagement from new sources of funding. And to that extent, we also engage with other stakeholders in the financing community, like appraisers, with lessors, of course, rating agencies, and investors, to try and create the best or make sure that the best sources and more sources are available to finance our customers and the E-jets.
Fantastic. And Vadims?
Hi, John. So my role with Embraer is basically being as a Deputy Marketing Director, responsible for Africa and Middle East. And on top of that, I have also leasing solutions of globally covered by Embraer. Prior to being in Embraer, I was 10 years with the airlines, so actually within the Europe. And my expertise basically airlines across different segments: low-cost carriers, regional carriers, and hub-and-spoke carriers. So have quite a lot of experience with industry, understand really what really airlines need from that perspective.
Brilliant. So let's stay with you then, Vadims, because of course we want to talk about the African opportunity and the white paper that we're obviously releasing alongside the podcast as well. So give us a bit of an insight into what the data's telling you and telling us about the intra-African market specifically, but generally the trends that you've found.
Yes, John. So what actually, interestingly, I was just recently working with the African markets and trying to really understand what's actually the main concerns of the how to develop the regional connectivity. So, and again, the scope of my analysis and study was really looking on the intra-African markets and understand really what are the main challenges and trying to really look from different perspectives. I'm completely agreeing with political consensus that they need to have a liberalization efforts continuing, and also overcoming the infrastructure challenges. But my main actually focus in the article was mainly looking on the airlines and really looking how they can, what kind of the aircraft they operate on those routes, and if it's the right aircraft for the African market. So just to give you a little bit of the hint here, is that I was quite surprised just to see that only 9% of the flights are actually intra-regional traffic. So, and this is quite a low number comparing with different regions. And to my also surprise that I saw that intercontinental traffic is quite a big proportion of all the traffic what is happening in on African continent. So again, intercontinental traffic is covered predominantly by foreign carriers, which use their well-developed hubs to further provide connectivity for the passengers. Whereas for the African carriers, with really not so much developed inter-regional connectivity, they don't have those advantages. So how they can actually, and what will be the advantages for them just to grow this inter-regional connectivity? First of all, we all know that according to IATA, that on average, African carrier losses $1.10 per passenger. And also the load factors on African continent is the lowest across all the regions. So how to overcome that? So then looking on specifically inter-regional markets, I was surprised just to see that how many different aircraft operated on that segment. So just to give you a hint, for instance, 15% of all the flights on inter-regional markets were operated by the wide-body aircraft. And then that's like a logical question what I have. Is it the right aircraft to operate on the inter-regional markets? We know that those aircraft are quite expensive, and economically they can only work when there is a sufficient demand to maintain those operations. And on top of that, what is also interesting is that even from the distance perspective, most of the intra-regional routes are within the distance of 4,500 kilometers, which is, I would say, mostly for crossover or narrow body operations here. So this is one of the examples I'm mentioning. Second example, and this is another interesting perspective, just looking on the lower side of the spectrum. Another 15% of all the intra-regional flights operated by turboprop aircraft. And you think this is just a normal aircraft for those missions. Yes, but then interestingly, if you dig one point further, then 50% of all those flights are operated with the distance greater than 500 kilometers. And then this really shows that turboprop aircraft is not probably the most ideal aircraft for those missions in terms of the speed and also in terms of the comfort of the passengers. So this is where I see really a lot of opportunities for the African carriers to right-size their operations, to make it more efficient, and actually trying to boost the regional connectivity and improve the load factor.
Yeah, I think that's the word, and Embraer, I think, coined it. I might be wrong, but you know, the right sizing, and it's so applicable. It's such a great term to use for the African market, because like you say, there are some routes where you've just got to have the right tool for the job. You know, you need to put a nail in the wall. You don't use a sledgehammer. You know, it's the same thing. You need to get the right size tool for the job. And now's the opportunity to definitely look at that. So I wanted to bring Matheus into the conversation and basically talk about Africa again specifically, but from a customer perspective. So, of course, you recently delivered some E2s, E2s to Air Peace in Nigeria. You've got some orders for new E2s from Congo Airways as well. But do you see a continuing trend towards new aircraft orders, or is there a really buoyant market for the pre-owned market?
Well, I would say it's a mix of both. And of course, we're facing a different era now. There used to be a time in which the pre-owned market was, the main active market. But now, with Air Peace and Congo, as you mentioned, trailblazing with the E2 in the African market, I expect more airlines to follow suit. There are many big markets that are still not addressed and that are suited for the capabilities of the E2. But that doesn't mean that the pre-owned market will not as well be, active on itself. We've just seen a lot of activity on the secondary market, as we call it, for the E-jets in this past year, and a lot of airlines even starting operations with E-jets. So I believe that there will be an opportunity for both. Of course, it's different business models, it's different timing if you're going to buy new or pre-owned aircraft. But I think it's great examples that you mentioned because these two airlines they have a strategy in mind, and with the new technology products, they will be able to show to their customers what this is about, and the competition and the airlines that are neighboring and seeing their operations will have a chance to take a look more closely and see how the E-jets and the E2s are adaptable to their business model. So I believe, that this barrier of having newer jets with African airlines is already behind us. And I do expect some new orders as well. As you know, we have big, important customers in the region, and it would only be natural if in the near future they also upgraded to E2s. And so we're looking forward to that. And it's a very important market for Embraer to address.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we know that from all the work that you've done over the years, and of course the airlines that you've supported, and of course they've been generally not as badly affected as those who've got the larger gauge aircraft, etc. So there's a huge opportunity. But while we're with you, Matheus, I wanted to talk to you specifically about the financing side, because you have these conversations, you're involved, and it always dominates our conversations when we talk about African airlines, be it startups or expansions. How do we get the financing? What I want to understand from your side is, in the conversations you have, what are the challenges that you find with financing in Africa, and how can we overcome them, which is probably more important?
Sure. Well, like Vadims mentioned about African carriers, load factors, and profitability, that translates as well to the appetite of the financiers. And there are other issues as well for each region, but specifically to the African region, there's a lot of concerns about foreign exchange and about the jurisdiction itself. So how legally protected you are in case of a bankruptcy, in case you need to repossess. So that's something I think that governments should really consider, because it's beneficial for everyone. And the ultimate beneficial is going to be the passenger. So the citizens that use the service will be the ultimate beneficiaries of that, because if the airline is able to provide a better service because they're getting cheaper or more accessible financing, they'll be able to access better technology, newer aircraft. So I think that's one challenge. And of course, that's not dependent on the airlines themselves. On the African markets, we do have a lot as well of state-owned companies, and that certainly enhances the credit. So that sometimes facilitates arranging financing, because there will be a government behind supporting the transaction. Another thing that we are seeing that is developing, and we're trying to develop ourselves as well, and I'm sure my colleagues from the other OEMs face the same challenge, which is getting local banks, which are banks that know the local risks or the currency risks, and they know the airlines and the corporations better than foreign, more traditional aviation banks. So what we're seeing in some cases is that local banks are stepping in, despite not being specialized in aviation. And in the future, they might be As you see in South Africa, we have several different important players in aviation that are international banks themselves. They're financing transactions all across Africa and maybe even sometimes outside it. So we see those local banks stepping up as well, maybe by partnering with other institutions that have the experience, or maybe just developing themselves their own aviation financing structure. Africa also counts on several multilateral development banks, which are great. They are focused on this because they know that the regional connectivity is important for the development of the local economies and getting people together and making business happen. So they're all engaged, and of course from Brazil to support these transactions. So I see many different options. Lessors also have great appetite for African markets. So I think it's all about, it depends on the size of the airline, what kind of aircraft they're getting, what stage of their life or their development the airline is. But financing, there's many options. There are many options that you can look at, and there's certainly going to be many opportunities to be worked around. And we expect that new sources will come, and that some other sources that are not available in the African market today will be available in the near future as the markets develop. And we have several airlines that are simply great examples of perfectly or well-managed airlines compared to any peer worldwide. So, I think that this is a trend, that the better perception of the credits and of the legal framework on African markets will enable new sources of funding to be accessible in the near future.
Yeah, I think. Oh, Vadims wants to add something. Yes,
yeah,
Vadims,
John. I was just listening to Matheus, and from my airline background and understanding also what are requirements from the leasing companies and financial institutions. This is another interesting observation what I found out about African market itself. Just looking on average how many aircraft per airline African carriers have. It's on average around 6 aircraft per airline. And this is quite a small number, which basically doesn't really drive a lot of efficiencies for the airline. And this is how also many leasing companies and financial institutions looking on the airline, how big is the business, how much of the interest it can attract from their side. Because they also look that those airlines have to be, first of all, profitable and efficient, so that they can have actually a good long-term business with them. So I think this is one of also observations for me where I think it's important that African carriers follow the trend of certain consolidation, I would say, or getting bigger. So with bigger actually carriers can count those efficiencies. And then they will have much more opportunities also from the financial institutions and leasing community to actually bring better offers for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about that collaboration and partnership. And we've talked about this in all realms of aviation in Africa, that you should combine together to work on MRO facilities, training facilities. If you do it together and you do it as a group, the unit cost comes down. And it's the same thing when you go for this financing, but it relies on that partnership. I think the other point that you both made that's great is, yes, there is lots of opportunities out there, but we can look at your white paper, Vadims, and go, wow, this is so different to the rest of the world. And we can either see that as a massive opportunity, which is how I view it, and obviously how Embraer views it as well, that why can't Africa, with the population it's got, the geography that it's got, the rising middle class, the age of the demographic, why can't it be in the same league as the other parts of the world that have developed? And when that comes, then obviously the financiers are going to say, actually, African aviation is a really profit-making business. We've got examples. That's what we need on the continent, is we need examples we can hold up as a shining light, say, these are actual viable businesses in their own right. They're not simply relying on sovereign debt and sovereign loans to keep going. So I wanted to finish by coming up to you, back to you, Vadims, to talk a little bit about the leasing market. So we've seen a huge number of airlines that are looking to apply for AOCs in different markets. Nigeria is definitely one. We've seen some startups down in South Africa as well. So there's something that's getting people excited. But for those who are listening and attending AviaDev that are at the point of deciding what to do, they've secured some financing or they're in that process, what are the relative merits of leasing versus purchasing in the current operating environment?
Well, John, I wanted to mention one thing. All this, the crisis, what we actually going through now, actually the perfect time for opportunities for many carriers. But everyone needs to remember that there is certain rules across the globe, which is universal. It's not really something unique to Africa or Europe or Asia or Latin America, North America. More or less, how the leasing companies are looking on it are actually quite universal standards. They want to be sure that actually they know the people with whom they are working. So they're always checking what are the previous experience of those people. Did they already launched any carriers or worked in the successful carriers before? So that this experience is very important, and how established is their network. So it also means that those people can actually go and speak with certain investors and attract the initial capital, because initial capital is very important to start the airline. If there is no initial capital, it will be very difficult to convince leasing companies to lease them aircraft. And then the second one is also, of course, what leasing companies are looking, especially on business plans. So initial capital and business plan is two key elements of everyone who wants to start the business. And if they can have it, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for them to get this interest from the leasing companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Would you agree with that, Matheus?
Yeah, I would. And I think, the capital that Vadims is mentioning is essential for any airline. So you need the equity, whether you're going to purchase or lease it. It's not that I don't have the equity, then I'll just lease it. No, the lessors are also, they take the same approach. It's the same sort of risk analysis that they will take. It's just a different business model as to how you deliver your service to the customer. In this case, the leasing, of course, I think it gives more flexibility. So depending on the airline or what stage it is it trying to tap in a new market or to upgrade or to diversify, then maybe you start with leasing, just so you can test it, and then following on, you will of course decide to purchase the aircraft or do more longer term commitments. But maybe now, as we talked before, is something that there might be opportunities for you to get an aircraft on a better condition, and then maybe it's the opportunity. And we saw that with many airlines throughout the world. They needed the aircraft, and they were very well managed. They had the needed equity, and they just took the opportunity of getting available aircraft in better conditions as they would prior to the pandemic. So I think that decision, the leasing is more about, it could be about flexibility. And, of course, if you're sure, and then if you test it, then you can go to purchase it and then make a longer commitment. And then you do that balance of capital. Of course, there's been a lot of pressure on leasing companies on the past year. So they have been, trailblazing for everyone and on the front of most of the deals that were happening. And I believe, for African carriers to make that decision is just a matter of balancing your own fleet. Or maybe if you're in a testing mode, or you're not sure, or you want to make a commitment that is not so long, so that you're sure that you're going to be able to develop that market, then you can lease, because it's going to be easier phasing out of that aircraft if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think that it's being creative and being very flexible with what's on the table, and having those conversations very honestly with the lessors or with the financiers, because a lot of startups that I speak to, they don't have access, they can't consider purchasing, so it has to be leasing. But then it's, well, do you lease the most efficient new aircraft? Can I afford that? Or do I get something where it just represents great value which is the right aircraft for the market, and that will stimulate things moving forward. So no, thank you so much, both of you, for joining. So everybody that is listening, in the show notes, you will find a link to the white paper, so you can download that, have a read through. How can they best connect with both of you? Both on LinkedIn?
Yes, John, absolutely.
Fantastic. So I'll include those links as well in the show notes, so the guys can connect with you there and start the conversation, which is always a good place to start. Of course, as always, the Embraer team will be with us for Aviadev Africa this June. If anybody listening here a week out hasn't registered to attend, don't forget, head over to the website aviationdevelop.com and get yourself registered. It's completely free, and we've got a great lineup for you, including Gad Wavomba, the sales director for Embraer, who's going to be part of our speaking panel as well. We've still got some more podcasts planned over the coming months. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be here to support the recovery of African aviation, and I know that the Embraer team will be too. So we both look forward to supporting you going forward. Don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see you for the next episode soon. So thank you very much once again, Matheus and Vadims, for today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure.